Welcome to Entering Your Mind, where we explore the science behind mental health and wellness. In today's episode, we'll be diving deep into the effects of chronic stress on the brain and mental health. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the demands of daily life, you're not alone. Stress is something we all deal with, but when it becomes chronic, it can have a significant impact on both our brain structure and overall mental well being. To help us understand this better, we have Ashley House, a neuropsychologist from Chicago. She's here to break down how stress affects our brains, the mental health symptoms that follow, and how we can manage stress before it takes a toll on our lives. So let's jump right in. Let's start with the basics. What is chronic stress and how does it differ from acute stress?
That's a great question. Acute stress is a short-term reaction to a specific threat or challenge, like a big presentation or an unexpected deadline. It's usually temporary and fades once the stressor is gone. Chronic stress, however, is when stress persists over a longer period of time. It's often due to ongoing pressures like work, relationship issues, or financial strain. It keeps the body in a heightened state of alert, which can eventually take a toll on both physical and mental health.
So, when stress becomes chronic, how does it start to affect our brain? What role does stress hormones like cortisol play in all of this?
Chronic stress leads to a prolonged activation of the body's fight or flight response, and this is where cortisol comes in. While cortisol is essential for managing acute stress, when levels stay elevated for longer periods, it can damage brain structures like the hippocampus, which is involved in memory and emotional regulation. It also weakens the prefrontal cortex, which affects decision making and emotional control, and causes the amygdala to become hyperactive, making us more prone to anxiety and emotional reactivity.
That's really eye opening. So, with all that going on in the brain, what specific mental health symptoms or disorders are commonly associated with long term stress exposure?
Well, chronic stress can trigger a variety of mental health issues. The most common includes anxiety disorders, like general anxiety or panic attacks. It also can include mood disorders, such as depression, and then stress can also contribute to conditions like PTSD, especially if it's linked to trauma. In addition to that, people under chronic stress often experience sleep disorders, cognitive impairments like memory issues and irritability, or mood swings. Over time, this can make it incredibly hard to cope with daily life.
And this consistent stress can even lead to something like a mental burnout, right? Can you explain how chronic stress leads to burnout and its impact on someone's quality of life?
Exactly. Mental burnout is the result of prolonged stress that overwhelms a person's ability to cope. It manifests as emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion, making it difficult to manage work, relationships, or even basic daily tasks. This can lead to a significant decline in quality of life, leaving individuals feeling disengaged, unmotivated, and disconnected from what's important to them. Burnout often worsens existing mental health issues and can spiral into more severe conditions if not addressed.
So, now that we understand the risks of chronic stress, what are some of the most effective strategies for managing it? How can we prevent these strategies to the how can we prevent these changes to the brain and protect our mental health?
Well, one of the best ways to combat chronic stress is through lifestyle changes. Exercise is a powerful tool. It reduces cortisol, promotes neurogenesis, and improves mood. Mindfulness and meditation can help you manage emotions and reduce stress levels by enhancing neuroplasticity. Sleep is absolutely essential. Good quality sleep restores the brain and helps regulate stress hormones. A healthy diet rich in antioxidants and omega 3s can reduce brain inflammation and support, sorry, I got distracted, mental resilience. And of course, social support and therapy like cognitive behavioral therapy can provide coping strategies and emotional relief.
These are some great tips. It sounds like a combination of physical and mental strategies can really make a difference. But how can someone tell if their stress is becoming chronic and what early signs should they look out for?
That's another really good question. Early signs of chronic stress can include persistent feelings of anxiety or worry, emotional exhaustion, and difficulty concentrating. If someone is constantly feeling irritable or experiencing mood swings, or if their sleep is disturbed and becoming irregular, these are red flags. Physical symptoms like headaches, fatigue, and muscle tension also indicate that stress may be becoming overwhelming for that individual.
So, if someone recognizes that they're experiencing chronic stress and its effects, how can they start to recover? What role does neuroplasticity play in the brain's ability to repair itself?
Well, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to form new connections and adapt to new situations, even after prolonged stress. By engaging in stress reducing activities like exercise, mindfulness, and therapy, individuals can stimulate neuroplasticity, helping the brain recover. Over time, the brain can rebuild, form new neural pathways, and improve cognitive functions. It's a process that takes time, but the brain is incredibly resilient. I know we don't have all day on your podcast, but for those listeners who are curious more about neuroplasticity, there's an amazing book I read called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. It has a lot of good stories in it that explains neuroplasticity and talks about how the brain can really change and like create all these new pathways for people with different situations. There were some stories where these people were labeled as disabled and they were able to go through these different activities and their brain was able to create these different connections and pathways that helped these people who were labeled as disabled find out that they're not that disabled after all. And it even talked about phantom limb disorder and how your brain can create new pathways to help people cope with that, and how it can connect to like how you can touch something on your face and you can still feel it. Anyways, it's an amazing book. I highly recommend for all you listeners out there who want to learn more about neuroplasticity.
The brain can recover with the right strategies in place. Now, before we wrap up, are there any final thoughts or advice you'd like to share with our listeners?
My biggest piece of advice is to listen to your body and your mind. If stress is becoming overwhelming, take it seriously. Start with small lifestyle changes like practicing mindfulness or getting more physical activity, and maybe even reach out for support when needed. The sooner you address chronic stress, the better your chances of protecting your brain and mental health in the long in and your mental health in the long run.
Thank you so much, Ashley House, for sharing such valuable insight with us today. If you're listening and feel that chronic stress is affecting your life, remember that you are not alone and there are effective ways to manage it. Start small, take care of yourself, and reach out for help if needed. That's all for today's episode of Entering Your Mind. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast if you've enjoyed this conversation. Until next time, take care and prioritize your mental well-being.
Goodbye.